All right, everybody, so welcome to Friday Night Live on Sunday afternoon. But we are actually live, so that part of it's true. Today I'm going to do a little bit of inking for Inktober. So a while ago I did some loose sketches, little thumbnail sketches for a job, and while I liked the one that got selected, there was another one that I liked a lot, so I decided to go ahead and do a full-size inking of that. So let's go ahead and get started. Ooh.
So we got a couple questions coming in from the chat. If you're ready to answer some.
Yeah. Whenever you're ready.
We've got a viewer wondering, what tips would you have for drawing a graphic figure when it comes to its shape design?
So I guess my answer to that would be really look at the separation of light and dark. So what's lit, what's not lit. That would probably be my number one recommendation. And honestly, that's just good drawing. But especially when you're talking about doing more of a graphic drawing, like for ink or something like that. So yeah, just really trying to focus down on what's lit, what's not lit. So basically looking at the shadows. So for instance, even when I'm coming in and drawing some of these little vines and such, what I'm trying to imagine is that volume of the vine and then having it cast a shadow down onto his head.
And then another one, who are some of your favorite working comic book inkers working currently?
One of my favorites is, and I may be butchering his name, I hope I'm not, but Jonathan Glapion. He does a lot of inking for Greg Capullo, just a lot of inking in general. Danny Mickey is great. I'm drawing a blank on his first name, but and I may be butchering his last name again, but Grabadger, who does a lot of the inking for Stuart Immonen. So those would be probably, just right off the top of my head, some of my favorites. But there's a lot of really good inkers out there. But those would be, top of my list for sure.
And then another question is asking if there are any good books to start studying for inking.
There's several. I know that a while back there was a book that I think DC put it out, and it was basically an inking manual for DC. So that's a really good one. But mostly I would say do master studies more than anything. Pick some inkers that you personally like and just copy their style. Because inking is, if you already know how to draw, inking is 99% dexterity and design. So if you have the dexterity to duplicate a good inker's ink strokes and you get a good design sense, that's, in my opinion, again, there may be some top inkers out there that would disagree with this, but in my opinion, that's a huge part of it right there.
Have you looked through frame drawing methods?
I have. It's a good book. Yeah, all his books are good.
I feel like some of the stuff that he does for digital can be sort of retooled for inking traditionally.
Absolutely. His digital work is pretty much inking, more or less. So yeah, no, absolutely. Really, anything you can learn from that guy is going to be immensely valuable in anything you do in art.
And then to follow up, the viewer asks if there are any tips on materials like paper, ink, paint, and brushes. So maybe we could use that as a chance to do like a materials review of what you're working with today.
Okay. So materials-wise, it's pretty much all the classic stuff is more or less what I use. So I'm using a Series 7, a Winsor Newton Series 7 Klinsky sable. And that's, I think, pretty standard for brush inking. And that's mostly what in fact, I think that's all I've been using so far, I'm pretty sure. So that's what I use for brush inking. My ink, I'm trying out this ink for the first time, but it's just the Speedball Super Black. Only because I'm not really a huge fan of a lot of the ink being made now. A lot of it's very watery. So I had to kind of find a new ink because the last ink I bought was forever ago, and I bought a couple of canisters of it, which was the old Higgins stuff, and that was great. But a lot of it being made now, just I don't know, it's just it doesn't seem very strong. In fact, I know some inkers that will let it sit out and evaporate. But this stuff seems pretty good. I mean, yeah, it's a little watery, but it's better than a lot of other stuff that that I've tried out. And then I've also just got a Hunt's Mapping Point 102, which again is pretty standard for comic book inking stuff. There's nothing really special there. And then as far as the paper, it's just I think it's the Strathmore comic pages. So it's basically just smooth Bristol board. I think it's 300 pound, but I'm not entirely sure about that. But just any kind of, really the surface is going to be pretty individualized. I know some people that like a little bit of tooth to it. I know some people who like it glassy smooth. This is pretty smooth, which is actually what I like for inking, is something really pretty smooth. Some of the other stuff I've got over here, I don't know if I'll be using it, but I've got a couple of microns that I might be using. I've got a couple of, who is it that makes these? The Zebra brush pens. Again, I don't know if I'll be using those at all, but I've got them here just, better to have them and not need them than need them and not have them type of thing. So those are my materials. I don't think I forgot anything. I've got a couple other big brushes that, if I'm going to end up blasting in some big areas, but those are pretty unimportant. They're just, you could use almost any brush for that kind of stuff. So yeah, those are the materials I use.
A viewer's wondering if you use Pentel brush pens.
I've not extensively. I've used them a little bit, but not enough to really have a real strong opinion on them. But my cursory opinion, I wasn't a huge fan. But like I said, I didn't really use them that much. And with a lot of inking stuff, I think you need some mileage with it to really formulate an opinion. A valid one anyway. That's really true of materials in general. You really kind of need to spend some time with them before you can really offer up a valid opinion for the most part. Because there's stuff that the first time I used it, I didn't like it at all. And then, a couple years later, I loved it.
So another question.
Mm-hmm.
The viewer asks, what was the biggest learning curve for you when it comes to inking?
Time, probably more than anything. Just again, getting used to the materials and getting them to do what I wanted to do. Because I find that even when I draw, and even my sort of whatever you want to call it, visual style, for lack of a better term, is not dissimilar to inking. I mean, I'm very influenced by comic art, even in my paintings, and by like noir films, even in my paintings. So I didn't feel like there was that big of a learning curve, other than just the dexterity aspect of it. So I guess just learning to use the materials, and getting my dexterity so that I could pull the strokes that I wanted to pull, and that's still ongoing. So I would say that was probably my biggest learning curve, is the dexterity aspect of things.
And then a viewer follows up to ask, what pencil grade do you advise to ink over?
I use what did I use today? I thought I had it out here. I think it was just an HB, just a regular HB pencil. Sometimes I'll use a B, but I don't really notice too big of a difference as long as you don't put too much graphite down on the paper. I don't think it really matters. To me, at least, it doesn't matter to me too much. I guess that's the answer. Whatever pencil you use, just don't put too much.
Just know that you're going to be inking over it.
Yeah. And the more graphite you put on the paper, the more it's going to start to affect the way the paper behaves. So that kind of goes back to paper. And I said, try a bunch of them and see what you personally like. Well, if you pick a paper that you like and then you end up putting a whole bunch of graphite down, well, that's all of a sudden going to change the way that paper that you like so much responds, or how the ink responds to the paper. So.
So if you were wondering if you use a brush pen or normal brushes or pens to ink, well, you talked about using like some of the Pentels, and you have the Series 7 with you right now.
Right.
So I guess your experience with Quill then, or pens.
Yeah, I mean, I'll use all of them. When I'm just sketching in like a sketchbook type of scenario, I'll tend to use more microns and zebra brush pens. But if I actually sit down to do a proper inking like this, then I'll tend to use better materials like Series 7, and I'll be using some Quill as well. Usually I'll start off using brush, and then as I get into more finer detailed work, then I start using more Quill, or in the case of my sketchbook, micron.
A viewer says, "What's your favorite Quill, Peter or Nye?"
Wow, Peter.
Viewers also wondering. So he asked, which direction is the light coming from?
This piece actually has a dual light source. So I guess the key light would be coming from above and to the left, and then the side light would be coming from the right-hand side.
A viewer asks, hi, he says, "Hi Eric, I've been looking for a painting of Frankenstein huddled in the corner, peeping through a hole in a shed. Have you done a painting of this? I've been trying to look for it all over."
No.
Might be referring to the Wrightson.
Yeah, I suspect
inking.
he's talking about the Wrightson inking. Yeah. No, I've never done a painting of that. But yeah, Wrightson did a great inking. But I've never done a painting of that scene.
I think that's what he was asking, or to identify like what or who did that painting.
Yeah, Wrightson did the inking. Yeah, it's from. I think it was actually one of the deleted inkings from the book. I think he did. Well, actually, I think there was one that was in the book, and then there was also another one. So he inked the scene twice, and one was sort of a deleted scene, I guess, and then the other one is actually in the Frankenstein book that Wrightson inked. No, I wish I could claim that one.
So a viewer asks, he says, "I'm working on my first comic, and I'm debating on inking it digitally or physically. And which one would you recommend?"
I mean, I guess it's what you're asking. I guess it depends on what you're asking me to recommend. But for me, I like original artwork. I like artwork that actually exists in the real world, just so I have a personal bias there. So I would say ink it traditionally. But if you're looking to get the book done, then digital is probably going to be a bit faster and definitely easier to revise. So if you have changes that you want to make, it's definitely a more efficient way of going about it, I would think. Truthfully, I haven't done a lot of digital inking, so.
A viewer is wondering if you could go into some of the maintenance that you do for your Kolinsky brushes, like washing it in specific soaps or anything like that. So what would you do after, like you're done inking today?
For me, it's always been good enough just to kind of rinse the brush out and then use the Dr. Bronner soap? Is that what it is? The conditioning soap. You shouldn't really need to wash them, I don't think. Just water will take it out. I mean, it's
water-based.
Yeah, it's water-based ink, so it's gonna, it should come right out. But as far as conditioning the hairs, yeah, just a little bit of the Dr. Bronner's soap should be fine. Yeah, I don't think there's any particular maintenance, but if there's any inkers out there that have something to say about that. But yeah, I've never had a problem. Ink doesn't beat up your brushes the way that oils or even acrylics will.
And then a viewer asks, what did your reference look like for this drawing, if any at all?
Not much. Yeah, I didn't really have too much. I mean, I had some scrap reference that I just kind of found online of like trees and foliage and things like that, but no, not a lot of reference. Like I said, the original sketch was done just as thumbnails, and I don't shoot a lot of reference for my thumbnails. I don't usually shoot reference until they pick the piece they want me to do. So.
A viewer asks, how does inking practice influence the decision making in your painting process?
It helps me be more direct and also gives me better shape design. One of the problems with oils is actually its biggest strength as well, and that's that you can sort of push the stuff around all day long, which is great, but it can also foster some sloppy design habits because you can tend to just sort of blast things in and go, oh, well, I'll fix that later. Ink is one of the best cures to that because it's very difficult to fix that later in ink. Once it's down, it's pretty much down. I mean, unless you want to get into using whiteout, which is fine, but my goal is always to try and not use whiteout if I can avoid it.
And then a viewer is wondering if you have any ballpoint pen artists that you like.
I'm sure there are some. I'm not really thinking of any right off the top of my head, but I'm sure there are some. I don't typically study ballpoint pen inkers for ink. Again, just my own personal bias. There's nothing wrong with ballpoint pen inking, but it's just when I study inkers, I tend to study brush inkers because of what I'm trying to get out of it. So yeah, there aren't really any that I can think of, but I'm sure there are some that I like.
And then a viewer asks, for putting together an idea to creating thumbnails, sketching, inking, and coloring, how long should a regular comic book take to complete? And then he follows up by saying, I know it varies depending on how complicated the art is.
If you're talking about doing it for a living, you should be shooting for a page a day, at least. Because that's what they're going to be asking you to do for the most part. If you're working for another, if you're working for a company, if you're doing it professionally. If you're just, or not just, but if you're self-publishing, don't worry about it. Take as long as it takes. As an artist, your life's going to be full of deadlines, so no reason to beat yourself up and give yourself even more deadlines if you can take your time on something, take your time on it.
So a viewer is wondering what your opinion is on the art of Andy Braze. You familiar with
I like Andy's stuff. Yeah, so I don't think I'd call him a ballpoint pen inker, but yeah, I like Andy's stuff a lot. It's really good. But yeah, he uses certainly more pen than brush. But yeah, his stuff's awesome. Really good. Met him once or twice. Nice guy too.
And then another one asks if Mark Tech's on Wolverine an influence for your brush inking.
No, not really. Most of the influences on my inking would probably be Wrightson, would be obviously a huge one. Joseph Clement Cole is a really big one. Frazetta, Glapian, who I mentioned earlier. And again, I apologize if that's not how you pronounce his name, but yeah, so those would be some of the bigger ones. Not that Tex isn't good, but not really. Just hasn't really been an influence on my inking.
So a follow-up question to that, if there are any contemporary inkers that are influencing sort of how you work today?
Yeah, like I said, Jonathan Glapian. He's
Yeah.
he inks now, and he's a big one. I mentioned a few earlier. Grab Edger, I think, is really good, super clean, like beautifully clean work. That I would like to get my work to be a little cleaner. So his stuff is great. Danny Mickey is also phenomenal. So yeah, pretty much the guys that I mentioned earlier are the guys that I look at. And I'm sure there's more, but again, those are the ones that are coming right to mind right now.
And then another viewer asked if there are any art books that you would recommend for someone starting a collection.
Yeah, there's a ton that I would recommend. If you're talking about specifically with inking, there's a few out on Joseph Clement Cole right now that are really good. The Wrightson Frankenstein book is great. But it just in general, some of my favorites out there are the James Bama book. I can't remember the overall title of it, but it was pretty much a comprehensive collection of his illustration work from before he started going into Western fine art. So that's one of my personal favorites. A lot of the stuff that Illustration House is putting out now is really good as well. So those are all really awesome books. I'm kind of into more older stuff, which probably doesn't come as a huge surprise. But so a lot of the golden and silver age illustrators are kind of more where my collection is at. I wish they would put out a book on Mead Schaefer and or Saul Tepper. That's where I would be starting my collection if they would put those books out. But there's so many great books out now. I mean, it's kind of hard to pin it down to just a couple. You know, back when I first started as an art student, it would have been a lot easier to single out specific books because there just weren't that many of them.
They were all like out of print.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there were some, but yeah, they were all out of print.
Now that you're kind of getting into some of the texture, on his shoulder, viewer asks, what do you focus on to keep the many tiny shapes in your inking from fragmenting the image?
That's an excellent question. I'm not really sure I have an answer to it. A lot of it is just by eye. A ton of it is just by eye. As I'm going through, I'm just constantly sort of reassessing and trying to figure out exactly how much I want to keep blacked in and how much I want to do with hatching. Like you'll notice that I keep going back and forth on the teeth, you know, trying to figure out exactly how much rendering I want to do in those teeth or how much I want to just keep it blocked in. So yeah, I don't really have an answer to that. It's just kind of by eye, you know, as I progress through the piece, you know, what feels right more than anything.
And then a viewer says, rate the Franks in order of preference. Frazetta, Miller, Quietly, and Nathan's. So like Nathan's hot dogs.
Wow. You guys are killing me. Everyone always trying to get me in trouble. They're all wonderful artists. Jeez, you guys. Let's see. So what was it?
Rosetta, Miller, and Quietly.
Pretty much in that order.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much in that order. But again, just my personal opinion. Please, no one come burn my house down or anything.
Nathan's Hot Dog CEO, please. And then, well, another viewer asked if you have any favorite tattoo artists.
Honestly, I don't know a lot of the tattoo artists. I mean, there's a lot of tattoos out there that I see that I like, but I don't really follow the actual artists as much as maybe I should. So no, not really.
And then, sort of on the same category, if there's any artists from the Silver Age that you particularly enjoy.
I'm not sure exactly where that delineation comes in, but I would consider Rockwell Silver Age. But yeah, I'm not enough of an illustration historian to know exactly what those time periods are.
Oh, it's Silver Age Comics.
Oh, Silver Age
Yeah.
Comics. So Silver Age, again, I'm trying to think of what years those would actually be. Is Kirby Silver Age or is he Golden Age? I mean, he's kind of both. I mean, the guy had such a long career. So, I mean, Kirby, obviously. Hard to remember this stuff while I'm actually trying to put down ink strokes.
It's from like the mid-50s to the 1970s.
Yeah, so definitely Kirby's in there, obviously. Trying to think who else would be a favorite of mine from that era. God, drawing a complete blank right now. Trying to think. Would Gene Colan be considered in there? Probably, right? I mean, he's kind of more 70s, so I don't know if he would be considered in there or not. But Gene Colan is great, one of my favorites. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Doctor Strange and Spider-Man. What's his name that created Doctor Strange and Spider-Man, along with Lee? Ditko, that's his name. One of my favorites. Really good.
The viewer actually restates that, to clarify, like 1960s to 1980s. So if that opens it up a little bit.
Yeah, so yeah, then obviously Gene Colan falls well within that. So he's great. Then you're starting to get into even guys like Sienkiewicz, who came in the late 70s and into the early 80s.
The viewer brings up John Buscema.
Buscema, obviously, yeah, Buscema's awesome. I'm not sure who doesn't like Buscema to be honest, but I mean maybe there's people out there that like killing puppies too, so maybe there's someone out there that doesn't like him. All kinds of crazy people. But yeah, so those would be a lot of the good ones in my opinion.
And then I guess sort of on the same topic, but a little more specific, any favorite Swamp Thing artists?
Yeah, I mean Wrightson obviously is gonna be kind of top of the heap on that one. But Kelly Jones is also awesome. Capullo is amazing, even though he hasn't done a ton of Swamp Thing stuff. But hopefully, there's been rumors that more might be coming down the pipe. But he did some covers for for Justice League Dark, and he did a couple of short stories, or at least one short story. Was there two? So yeah, his stuff is awesome as well. So those would, I guess, again, just off the top of my head, those would probably be my top three. But again, no, I'm not really going into any deep cuts there either. I mean, it's pretty much pretty straightforward. But yeah, I mean, I think Wrightson's Swamp Thing. I mean, obviously he created him, so Wrightson's Swamp Thing was ridiculous. But I also think that Saga of Swamp Thing run was one of the best comic runs ever. Not even just Swamp Thing. I don't even need to qualify it. To me, it's one of the best comic runs ever.
And then another viewer follows up to ask if you have any love for Wally Woods or the old Mad magazine guys.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, no, I mean, you're talking about my childhood, so yeah, absolutely. It's just not what I do, but I did get to do probably the closest I'll ever come to any of the Mad magazine stuff was the Crazy cover that I just did, which was kind of Marvel's version of a satire mag, and they did a one-off, so a little bit of self-promotion there. But yeah, so I just did that. That's probably as close as I'll ever come to getting to do anything like that.
And then this is sort of a recap question, but a viewer asked if what pens or brushes do you use when you're out with your sketchbook?
The zebra brush pens and microns, and then also if you're talking about like a ballpoint pen, I use the zebra. It's 401s, something like that, just like a regular little clicky ballpoint pen.
So a viewer is wondering, would you say that inkers are more concerned with style than pencilers? Pencilers being more focused on character and story, while inkers being more focused on the tools and how can they achieve certain lines?
That's a difficult one to answer because I think that would probably depend on the individual artist. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of an inker's job, is the translation of pencil into black and white ink. So style is obviously going to be a huge part of what they're getting into. But I wouldn't say it's not a concern of pencilers. But yeah, I mean, a penciler's job is composition and storytelling and for lack of a better term, draftsmanship. So drawing. But inkers also help with all of that stuff as well. I mean, how an inker comes in and spots blacks is going to play a huge role in composition and all that. So, but yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, I would say that's job number one for an inker, would be that final stylization. It's what's going to see print. So yes, I would say that it's probably a higher priority for an inker. But really, it's something that, in my opinion, should be a symbiotic thing. I don't think that, especially in today's day and age, back in, you go back, and a lot of times when Kirby was penciling stuff, the inker was doing a lot more of the work. In fact, he was doing sometimes little more than just layouts, and then inkers were coming in and finishing stuff off. So, yeah, I don't know. So yes, I would say that in general that's true, but far from an absolute. And I think a lot of it depends on the relationship between a given inker and a given penciler.
And then related to that, another viewer asks, would you rather be a penciler or an inker, or which do you enjoy more?
Oh, I'd much rather be a penciler. Yeah, if I could find, if I got to do some penciling, if I could find an inker that I really liked their work and I thought that they showcased my pencils well, I have no real desire to ink professionally at all. I mean, I like inking, but part of the reason I like it is because I don't have to do it professionally. If I was a professional inker, I don't know, like I wouldn't want to ink someone else's work. Let's put it that way. I'm okay inking my own stuff. I don't think I would want to try and ink someone else's work. So yeah, I know I'd much rather be a penciler.
Just inking as like part of the tradition of like comic book pinups, sort of doing it because of that.
Yeah. I just, I kind of, yeah. So like the history of it, and also, it helps me work on skills that maybe I don't ordinarily get to work on all that much as a painter. It's just different. So yeah.
And then I guess one more question related to that. A viewer asked, what are some other careers that illustrators pursue other than comic book artists?
Book covers, gaming, like Magic the Gathering and things of that nature. Um, Storyboarding, concept design. I don't know. There's lots of them. Editorial illustration. Yeah, there's a lot of careers out there for illustrators. In fact, I wouldn't necessarily say that comic art is really even in the top of the list anymore. When I was a kid, it certainly was, but yeah, I don't know. Now, I don't know. It doesn't seem to be as popular with, from my perception. Again, I have no data to back this up, purely anecdotal. It doesn't seem like being comic artists is as popular with younger artists. Mostly old guys like me.
I feel like a lot of people still like draw inspiration from comics, but they might not be striving to like work in the American industry.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably true. Yeah, certainly. I mean, comics are so all pervasive. I mean, it's kind of like, I think most people are inspired by it on some level. I'll be curious to see if that's as true, 20 years from now. Yeah, I'll be really interested to see where it goes. Because, I mean, even still now, comics were huge in the 90s. Well, if you were, say, 6, 7, 8 years old in, 96, well, you're still not that old now. So, and comics were, just gigantic back then. So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I suspect that video games will probably be of a bigger influence in the future because the visuals are so incredible. Whereas when I was a kid, video games, they were fun, but I wouldn't say that the visuals were stunning is not the word I would use. So they were pretty simple.
And then sort of a related question to that. A viewer asks if you have any advice to learn another drawing style like manga, comic, or cartoon if you have studied fine art.
Read that again.
If you have any advice to learn another drawing style like manga, comic, or cartoon if you've studied fine art.
So you're saying what would I do if I wanted to learn one of those other styles if I was trained as a fine artist?
From a fine art training.
Most of it's just going to be finding the way in which each of those styles interprets the basic tenets of draftsmanship. So you've basically got shape, value, edge, color. I mean that's from a academic standpoint, just a purely, academic drawing standpoint. That's pretty much what you have to work with. So really all it is figuring out how those different styles or how those different genres interpret shape, value, edge, color. So for instance, if you're talking about manga, for the most part, edge isn't going to play as big a role. Their edge work is pretty simple. That's not to say that it's easy, but it's certainly, simpler than with painting, or with, in the case of, what I'm doing here, it's figuring out how to feather to create a soft edge, how to feather to create a hard edge, or how to rather not to feather. So basically just using all of those different tools at your disposal to try and create those same basic effects. But there isn't really anything, to me, intrinsically different about it. It's just a different stylization of those same basic tools. I think there's validity to all art. To do anything really, really well, it requires an immense amount of knowledge and skill. So I hope that answered the question. But yeah, just looking at the way in which they stylize those same basic concepts.
So a viewer wonders how much you visualize before you ink. Visualize as in seeing what you'll draw.
100%. Yeah, no, whenever I draw and paint, I do my best to visualize exactly what it is that I want out of my next stroke. So, yeah, so 100% for the most part. It doesn't always work out.
Another viewer mentions, they say, loved your work, your God of War comic book covers. Do you prefer painting zombies or Vikings?
How about zombie Vikings? That would be pretty awesome. It was that was really fun. I don't know. It's a tough thing. I like painting all of it. I wouldn't want to be, stuck painting just one thing. I mean, if it came down to what would I want to paint, if I could only paint one thing for the rest of my life, I would probably pick zombies between those two. But I wouldn't want to have to make that call. I like doing all of it, and that was a really fun job to work on for sure. So, but that was definitely one that I was picked for. It wasn't something that I pursued. Whereas a lot of the zombie stuff I kind of pursued. So I guess that would be your answer there. But I did enjoy working on it. It was a lot of fun. Like, the character's great. The whole look of that game was incredible.
A viewer asks if this is from imagination.
For the most part, yeah.
I guess you could kind of talk about some of your thumbnailing that you did for it.
Yeah, so I got hired to do a print, a fine art print, for lack of a better term, whatever, collector's print, limited edition, by Justin Ishmael and Bottleneck Gallery, and they wanted me to do Swamp Thing, and so I just kind of picked the scenes that I wanted to paint Swamp Thing doing. I mean, I had quite a bit of freedom on it, and so I just sat down and I kind of came up with 4 or 5 ideas and drew them out, and really loosely in pencil, and then kind of went in and inked them up just because I wanted to practice my inking. And this was one of them, not the one that got picked. The one that got picked is an oil painting. You can see it on my Instagram or at Bottleneck Gallery. I think there's still some available. So there you go. There's another pitch for you. And this was one that I liked a lot. I titled it Swamp King because he's kind of sitting in a throne. So I thought that was kind of fun, and So then I kind of in my own mind started coming up with a story that went along with it, that I think would be fun to do, maybe someday. But yeah, that was about it. And again, when I do my thumbnails, I try to draw out of my mind, just out of my imagination, out of my mind's eye as much as I possibly can. Unless I get stuck on what something looks like. So if I can't figure out, what a gnarled tree looks like, for instance, I might go and find some reference for that. But no, pretty much out of my imagination. The only thing I've got up here in front of me right now is just my original little thumbnail sketch, one of Greg Capullo's drawings and one of Bernie Wrightson's drawings. So I always hesitate to say that something's completely out of my imagination because, there's always some kind of reference that I'm using.
Whether that's from like your own head that you're referencing, like drawings that you've seen from other people.
Right, exactly. I wouldn't want to insult, Misters Wrightson or Capullo by saying that I'm completely making this up, because I'm certainly looking at their work a fair amount while I'm doing it.
And then sort of a follow-up specific question to this. Viewer asks, for fictional creatures like Swamp Thing, are you creatively inventing new anatomy and attachment points that doesn't exist? If so, how do you choose where to put the additions?
I guess I probably am. I mean, certainly I'm inventing it, and while my anatomy knowledge is pretty solid, it's not flawless. I know, shocking. So yeah, I mean, if I can't figure out what something, how something actually works, or if I think something will work better compositionally, then I redesign it, especially with something like Swamp Thing, because, he's not, the only reason he looks humanoid is because of the mind that the green used to create the body. So he only looks human because he perceives himself as being human. So there really is no anatomy. He just kind of has he's just plant matter in a humanoid form. So, yeah, so you can pretty much do whatever you want. I mean, Alec Holland is a pretty smart dude, but I doubt that he, has completely memorized the human body, so even his perceptions of it would be not perfect either, I guess. I don't know, that's kind of my thought on it. So I only have to be as good as he is for it to make sense. So yes, and then other times it's just, how things piece together, how things work. If it looks better to not be accurate, then I'll not be academic accurate. I would rather it looked good than was accurate in this instance, in the instance of something like comic art or Swamp Thing. I'm not too worried that someone's going to come in and say, that origin of the bicep isn't accurate. It's like, well, okay. I think it kind of looks cool. A lot of Frazetta's stuff was inaccurate, so, and his stuff was great.
And then a follow-up to that, now that you've done paintings of Swamp Thing and Man Thing, which of those two characters do you prefer?
Again, they're both great. I liked painting both of them. So again, that's a tough one. I like them for different reasons. I mean, I like the just sort of inherent design of Man Thing is really cool because it's a little bit more abstract and monstrous. So that's cool. But I think the genius of Swamp Thing is the fact that Bernie Wrightson abstracted him so much, but you can still see the humanity in it. So yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't really say one is better than the other because I think even their intentions were different. But I probably have a preference for Swamp Thing because the humanity that's there, I think it's a bigger aspect of Swamp Thing than of Man Thing. Man Thing's weird, trunk face thing that he's got, while it's cool and creepy, Certainly I would I would be freaked out by running into either of them out in the swamp. I think that Man-Thing would probably freak me out a little bit more. But I think from a storytelling standpoint, I think probably Swamp Thing. So, yeah. I hadn't really ever thought of it before. So, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I know that without thinking about it, I've always liked Swamp Thing more. So, but if I think about it, I guess that's my reasoning for it. So, how's that sound?
Yeah.
But I certainly wouldn't turn down the opportunity to paint either one of them again. They're both a lot of fun.
So going back to the topic of 90s comic books, a viewer asked if you prefer pencils by Todd McFarlane, inked by Erik Larson, or pencils by Erik Larson, inked by Todd McFarlane.
Oh, that's a tough one. That's a really good question. They certainly both have a both strong inking hand and strong penciling hand. So that's really interesting. McFarlane tends to have such a heavy inking hand that he makes almost everyone's pencils end up looking like his. So I don't know. That's a really good question. I like McFarlane as an inker a lot, but I like Erik Larson as a penciler a lot. I guess I'd probably go with McFarlane's pencils with Larson's inks. I think Larson, his inks tend to be a little bit more the penciler's hand. So I'm going to tend to side with the penciler. Whereas, like I said, McFarlane's his inks are great, but he tends to kind of make everybody look a little bit like they're his pencils, I guess. Yeah, how about that?
It's the same viewer that asked you the Nathan's hot dogs question. asking some good ones.
Yeah, those are good questions though. But yeah, I don't tend to really think about that stuff that much. So it's interesting to actually sit down and think about it, because I usually just know kind of what I like and what I don't like, but I don't really think that deeply about it usually. But all those guys, I mean, it's all that is just my opinion, because all those guys are so much better than I am that it feels almost blasphemous to even judge
Like categorize
what they do. Yeah, they're so damn good. So I don't know, tough to say.
So we have a series of questions that sort of circle around finance. So a viewer asks, how much would a commissioned comic cost per page?
I'm not sure I understand that question. You mean how much do comic artists get paid, or how much would I charge? So, yeah, I'm not really sure what exactly what they're asking for. I mean, I think rates for pages vary so greatly. It's kind of a difficult one to answer. Different companies pay so much differently, but I think that 100, 150 a page, I think, is generally speaking a pretty darn good rate in comics. I mean, as far as the going rate, I think that's a good rate. For me, yeah, it would be really difficult. I'd have to know what the project was, and I'm a little more picky about the projects that I pick based off of what they are, more so than what I'm getting paid. I mean, certainly what I'm getting paid plays a role, But I'm going to charge a lot more for something that isn't going to push my career in the direction that I want it to go than I am something that doesn't, So basically, if someone wants me to do something that I don't feel is in a direction that I want to go in, I'm going to charge them a lot more personally. Or I'm going to expect a lot more, and then if they don't want to pay that, that's fine. But if it's something that's like, it's a direction I want to go in with my career, and I would be doing something similarly on my own anyway, and the deadlines are more lenient. So yeah, a lot of other things factor into it. If you're going to have a crazy deadline, you're asking me to take time away from spending with my wife, and so I'm going to expect you to pay me for that inconvenience. So yeah, I know that's a cryptic answer, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into what I charge for stuff, or what
who's giving you the commission.
Yeah.
So related to that, a viewer asked if, they say, is the adage starving artist something that all artists have to go through throughout some points of their careers, or is there financial opportunity / comfort always available if you're good enough?
Yeah, if you're good enough, you're gonna do well. But yeah, I mean, when you're starting out, yeah, you're gonna have to pay your dues, just like everyone does in any profession. I mean, there are very few professions that you come out of the gates and you're making a ton of money, despite what people tell you. Even most, lawyers and doctors struggle for a while when they're first, out in the workforce. So yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to pay your dues because that's just part of it. You have to build a reputation. You have to prove that you can do it under deadline, and you're not gonna come right out of the gates, making top dollar, nor should you, because there's guys out there that are also very, very good that have been doing it for years and have built up a reputation as being good to work with and can meet deadlines and love what they're doing, and all the other things that are, it's more than just making good artwork. But yeah, I mean, if you come right out of school and you're producing professional quality work, yeah, I mean, starving artist, I don't know. It's not like you're living in a poor village in Africa or anything. I mean, you're a professional in America. Manage your finances. Don't be foolish. But yeah, I mean, things are tough when you get started. It's it's the way it is. You're competing with the best artists in the world for work. So yeah, you're not going to get top dollar jobs with cush deadlines. You're going to get the jobs that all those guys don't want to do, basically. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I never starved. I don't know too many artists that didn't have, an attitude. If you're easy to work with and you're a good person and you can communicate well, then yeah, you're going to get work and you're going to do fine. So I don't know, that kind of came across a little harsh maybe, but yeah, it's it's tough being young. That's just part of it.
So some more technique and medium related questions. Viewer wonders if you've done work in acrylics as well.
I have worked in acrylic. It's a fine medium. There's a lot of artists out there that I like a lot that do great stuff in acrylic. I just personally don't like it. I don't like the feel of it. I don't like the way it handles. But man, Beasley sure made it sing. Drew Struzan sure made it sing. Greg Staples has done some great stuff in acrylic. Jim Murray's done some great stuff in acrylic. Tons of good artists out there that have done great stuff in acrylic that I admire immensely. And those are just some of them. So yeah, it's some people make it work. I don't like the feel of it. I don't like, it's sticky and plasticky, and yeah, not a huge fan. But
And
that's my shortcoming, not the mediums.
so you sort of touched upon this earlier in the stream, but viewers asking how inking has impacted your painting.
Um, Basically, like I said, it makes you think a lot more about what every shape that you put down. Whereas, with almost every medium that I've ever worked with, you can sort of not phone it in, but you can build it up. But with ink, it's what you put down. That's what's there, and that's what's gonna be there, and that's the end of it. It's not gonna, you can sort of wiggle your way through it to a certain degree, but you have to really visualize in your mind what you want each shape to be, and so it requires a lot more thought. It requires being aware and present and paying attention to what you're doing a lot more than most other media. So that's what I think it's great for, and that's mainly why I do it. Because, like I said, I don't do it professionally. I wouldn't insult professional inkers by pretending to be of a professional quality with inking.
So another viewer asked if you could talk about shape design and how to retain it when inking. I guess that kind of tied back into your previous response of like what you just said about like, I don't know, shape design and inking.
Yeah.
Last question.
Yeah, I mean, it's just how to maintain it through it. Well, in ink, to me, it's actually how maintaining it. That's not the problem. That's that's actually one of the downsides to it, that it gets maintained. It's not, there's nothing, once you put down a shape, the bigger challenge is making sure that you spot your blacks well. To me, most of the inking that I see that I'm not a huge fan of, it's because they don't spot their blacks. They rely too much on line. The graphic read isn't there. Now I'm going to say that, and then people are going to point out a bunch of examples like, well, what about, I don't know, Ralph Steadman, or what about so and so? It's like, yeah, I mean, there's exceptions to everything. But to me, yeah, it's that spotting of blacks that really carries an inking through. It's what makes Mignola's work so successful. Even the little bit of feathering that he does isn't really necessary, I don't think. I mean, it's great. It looks good. It gives texture and some rendering to his work, but it's definitely secondary to the big graphic read, which is just phenomenal, just ridiculous how good he is at that. In fact, it surprises people a lot of times when I point out Mignola as being one of the influences on my oil paintings. But it's true. I look at his work a lot for the same reason that I practice inking, because it forces me to really visualize the light and darks, essentially spotting blacks, spotting those shadows.
So speaking of visualization, a viewer asks if you utilize that in Quick Sketch.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, in certain styles of Quick Sketch, I wouldn't say always, but yeah, in certain styles of Quick Sketch, yeah, I've relied very heavily on spotting blacks. Yeah, absolutely. But it definitely depends. I mean, I've drawn in a few different styles of Quick Sketch over the years, so.
So a viewer says, "Great work, love your channel, and thanks for sharing. Any more Conan or / Frazetta demos coming up? Conan's my favorite comic. Savage Sword."
I don't know. Jeff puts all that stuff together, But yeah, I imagine there'll be something Conan coming up. You know, we're all pretty big fans of the character, so. In fact, in particular, keep an eye out on my Instagram for something Conan coming up. So I can't really talk about it yet. In fact, I probably shouldn't even say that, but it'll be announced soon, so I don't think it matters.
Another viewer asks if you did the drawing, the pencil drawing on the same paper, or did you do it on a different paper and transfer it? So I guess sort of talking about your process that led you to the pencils that you have for this inking today.
I did the pencils directly on this paper, but I did transfer my original little thumbnail sketch that I did for the pencils. But yes, the pencils that I'm inking right now, I did on this paper. But I had a pretty tight thumbnail, or actually, you know what? Give me a second. So that was my original thumbnail that I did, pretty directly in ink. So then I kind of blew that up, and now I'm doing a larger version of that. I printed it out on 2 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, and then used a light box to transfer it, and I corrected some of the drawing, like the legs were too small, and I didn't like the hands, so a few different things.
So a viewer asks, in inking, do you sometimes jump around the drawing like a painting, or is it usually starting from one place, moving out from there to judge the shapes/values together? So I guess sort of your workflow throughout an inking piece.
My workflow on an inking is very much like my workflow on a painting, where I kind of more or less finish areas off as I go, which is not really the way that I would advise you painting, but it's the way I do it. And then inking, I don't think it really matters too much, because you have your pencils underneath it, so you already kind of have the big picture established.
And then another question asks, do you put acting into anyone you draw? As in, do you feel into the character?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A huge part of being an illustrator is acting. You know, especially a comic artist. I mean, man, you better be able to act, otherwise you're gonna have a tough time, because you're basically playing every part. And there's nothing worse than having a comic book. Well, there's worse things. That's a silly statement to say. But it's, you know, when you're looking at a comic, it's always kind of lame when people are just sort of standing around a room. But the artists that can really put body language into it, and you know, you could take away the word balloons altogether, and you know what they're saying. That's way better. But yeah, certainly there's worse things in the world than stiff comic books.
And then another viewer is asking if you could tell us about the connection between shapes, designs, and silhouettes in rhetorical gestures of archetype characters. So I guess sort of like shape language as it relates to storytelling and character design.
Yeah, I mean, all of that plays a huge role. I mean, I think a lot of it is somewhat individualistic, but there's also things that, you know, more flowing gestures are going to imply a more free, graceful personality. You know, a stiffer gesture might imply more of a more rigid, uptight personality. So yeah, I mean, all those things are you know, everything plays a role. It's a visual language, so anything that you put into your artwork is communicating something to someone. So yeah, it all counts. It all matters. Now that it's important to not get too bound up on everything, but yeah, believe it or not, it all matters. Everything you put it down. When you become a professional artist, you'll realize it all matters, because every time you do something wrong, someone will email to tell you how you did it wrong. So, so yeah, it all matters. It's one of those things, just like in life, you know, everything matters. You know, your physical fitness, your diet, your tooth care, your fashion sense, it all matters. It's just you kind of have to pick what's going to be important to you, because if you spent your day doing everything that everyone else thinks you should be doing, you'd never get anything done. So yeah, it all matters. You just kind of have to pick the things that you're going to make the staples of your style, and run with it. You know, not everyone can be a great colorist, a great tonalist, a great composer, a great designer, a great I don't know what the word would be, perspectivist. It's like you're not going to be good at everything, so you kind of have to pick, what you're going to showcase in your artwork. But yeah, it all matters. It all counts. Someone like Rockwell is a great example of that. The guy, he was one of the few guys out there that there really isn't too much that you can pick on in his work. He was pretty much good at everything. I mean, maybe his stuff is saccharine, but that was on purpose. It's not like it's not like when he was doing a war scene, it wasn't saccharine. A war scene felt like you were in the middle of a war scene. So, it's just he chose his subject matter was, going to be Americana. So, that's just going to be part of it. But yeah, I mean, it all matters. It's all important. It's just you can't do all of it. So you have to choose the things that I always say be professional at everything. Get to a professional level at everything that you do, and then pick the things that you're gonna specialize in. There's very few guys out there, very few artists, people out there that are equally good at tech and anatomy and mood and landscapes and it's a pretty rare thing to see. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses. To me, what I want is that I just don't want to have anything that someone can pick on and say, oh, he can't do that. It's like, well, maybe I can't do that as well as I can do other things, but I can do it.
So sort of related to that, another viewer asks, what do you think of the newer styles of art adopted by Marvel? I feel like they're not as detailed as previous decades.
It depends on what you're talking about. I mean, if I look at people like Stuart Amonin or Olivier or trying to think of some of the other guys. I think they're immensely detailed and incredible artists. I'm trying to remember the two guys that just did House of X and Powers of X. I'm drawing a blank on their name.
Pepe Larraz.
Yeah, Pepe Larraz is phenomenal. So yeah,
RB Silva.
Yeah, RB Silva. Yeah, both those guys. I think their work's incredible. So yeah, I don't know. It depends on exactly what you're talking about, I guess. I don't see as much. I mean, that's what I would consider the Marvel house style right now, personally. But yeah, so I guess I would have to see exactly what you were talking about. But I don't think there's as much of a house style with Marvel as there used to be honest. I think they're actually much more diversified than they were when I was a youngin' anyway. So yeah, I don't know. There certainly are some guys that aren't as detailed, but the big flagship guys, I don't know. They still look pretty detailed to me, especially for. I mean, a lot of those guys don't produce a page a day. I think I read where Pepe Larraz, I think, said it takes him about 6 weeks to do a comic, but he also inks it as well. So yeah, I don't know. Those they look pretty darn good to me. But I like it. But I like the old stuff too. I mean, I like, going back to the Ultimates days. I mean, if you're talking about Finch, yeah, I mean, obviously, his stuff is ridiculous. I don't know how that guy does a monthly book. There's just the amount of detail in that. I don't know if he does a page a day or not, but man, if he does, that's pretty incredible. Maybe he'll email me and tell me, because I'm a huge fanboy. But yeah, his stuff, yeah, maybe it's not as detailed as that, but I don't think it's as busy as it used to be. Like if you're going back to the 90s and you've got, Portacio and Lee and McFarlane and all those guys, the work was busier, but I don't know if I would say it was more detailed. So it may be me also getting into semantics. But not to say it's not good. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that I wouldn't consider detailed, that I like their work quite a bit. So yeah, I guess it also depends on what you mean by detailed. But yeah, regardless, I like a lot of the stuff that I see coming out of Marvel, especially in the last year or two. I think it's phenomenal work. Like I said, better than I can do, so what am I going to say?
And then related to that, a viewer is wondering who your favorite comic book villain is, if you have one, and why.
My favorite comic book villain? There's a few really good ones, and again, I could toe the line and say, Joker, which is, it's kind of a gimme. But I also like Magneto quite a bit. So he's pretty cool. At times, I've actually liked, this is probably going to be, here we go. Here's a deeper cut that a lot of people probably aren't going to agree with. Mojo. I think Mojo is one of the worst and best villains, kind of all at the same time, depending on who's writing them and what they're doing with them. But I think at times he's incredibly psychotic and cool.
He's very much like a comic book villain.
He's very much.
Not so much as like, okay, he's
intentionally
a terrorist.
Yeah.
Intentionally,
he's a comic book villain. He was social media before there was social media. He's a complete fabrication. I don't even think that what you see in the comics is what Mojo is. He's created an identity that helps him get viewers, and I think he even loses track of that sometimes. I don't know that there is a real Mojo. I think he just gets kind of lost in all that. I mean, the Mojoverse really was prophetic. It's amazing how much our world has actually turned into the Mojoverse, which is kind of terrifying. But yeah, so there we go. How about that one? That's one that's bound to get people to say you're wrong. So there you go. There's my limb I'm going out on. I like Mojo. But Magneto is probably one of the most well-rounded, well-thought-out villains, almost to a detriment. He's so good that they just basically keep telling the same Magneto story over and over and over and over again. But that's because it's such a great story.
It's like his motivation for more or less like stays the same, but the world around him has changed.
Yeah, and you get it, right?
To see.
You get why he does what he does. It's like you can't blame the guy. He lived through the Holocaust. It's like, yeah, I get it. if I were you, yeah, I'd probably be doing the same thing. That wasn't Christian, was it? That sounds like a Christian question.
Christian question? No. Well, you wanted Mojo to start some conversation in the chat. It's definitely going off now. Your ass says, tell us more about Shatterstar, Live Field, and Mojo.
Oh wow! Now you're really asking for it. Um, the whole long shot Shatterstar thing has gotten really weird. So yeah, I don't know. I haven't really followed that much of that stuff, but what I know of it has gotten really weird. I mean, my knowledge of Shatterstar pretty much goes back to the 90s. I liked the character a lot, but that was mainly because I was a huge long shot fan. I mean, I bought the original long shot miniseries like at a comic book shop back in the 80s. So that's how far I go back with long shot. That was an awesome book. Still one of my favorite comic book miniseries of all time, actually. So that's great. But yeah, the whole long shot Shatterstar thing. Yeah, I don't know. He's his clone and his son, and I don't know. It's weird. He's like his own dad now. It's weird. Yeah, it's that whole thing is kind of, I don't know. But I'm a Liefeld fan. That's another one that's gonna light up the chat group. I like Liefeld stuff quite a bit. He's good at everything that I'm not good at. So I dig the guy's work. I think there's a charm and an energy to his work that I think is very difficult to accomplish.
So a couple stray questions that I missed. So a viewer just says Jay Lee Hellshock versus Mignola Hellboy. I'm not sure if he's talking about the characters or literally just like the two books.
Well, I mean, it's almost impossible to compare the two books because there's been all of like 3 or 4 issues of Hellshock, and Hellboy's one of the best ongoing comic series of all time in my opinion. So yeah, there's no competition there. As far as stories, they're not really that. I mean, I guess there's some similarities, but they're not really that similar. But I like both. I mean, man, Jay Lee and Mignola are both two of my favorites. So yeah, it's a tough call only because I admire both guys so much. But I mean, the real answer is so clearly Hellboy because it's just, it would be like trying to compare, well, maybe not now, but Star Wars and Battlestar Galactica, for most of my life. Battlestar Galactica was a TV series that ran for a couple seasons, and then Star Wars was Star Wars, right? So, but I like both guys. I like both books. I was always kind of bummed when I was younger that he didn't do more with Hellshock. So, I do like the character.
And then could you do a really quick materials recap for some of the late viewers, like what brush you have working with?
Again, most of my materials are pretty straightforward. So this is a Kolinsky Series 7, Winsor Newton Series 7 Kolinsky Sable, number 1. This is just a Robert Simmons, synthetic sable. I'm not even sure what size it is. It's just a brush sort of for blocking in big areas. That's all I've used so far. My ink is Speedball Super Black, but then I've also got a couple of microns that I may get to using at some point. We'll see. I do have a Quill that I will probably get to using at some point. We'll see. And then I've got a couple of the Zebra brush pens as well. But yeah, so that's about it.
So this kind of goes into more of like the sequential craft of comic book storytelling. But the viewer asks, how do you best learn to utilize page layouts and page turns? And are there any tricks or just practice?
There really aren't any tricks to anything, but the best advice I ever got was actually from again, I hope I'm going to mispronounce his name, Ricky Perdine or Ricky Perdin. He's the submissions editor at Marvel, and the advice he gave me was to think of basically page grammar. So think of each page as a statement that's going to have, you know, a capital at the beginning and a point to a complete statement during the page, and then punctuation at the end of the page. And then you turn the page, and that's another sentence. And those sentences should come together as a paragraph, and each paragraph should come together as a page, and each page should come together as a chapter, and so on and so forth. And that was some of the best advice I personally ever got. I'd never really thought of it that way before. But thinking of, you know, just like writing a story, thinking of each page and group and scene and chapter and, you know, issue as a different, as a sort of a piece of grammar or story structure. That was very, very helpful to me. So that would be, I pass that on to you.
So since you brought up Liefeld, the viewer is wondering what you think of his wacky anatomy.
I think it's fine. I think a lot of comic artists have wacky anatomy. I mean, if that's what you're going to nail the guy down on, then, you know, you better, you know, take Kirby down off of the comic Mount Rushmore, because dude's anatomy is pretty wonky. Mike Mignola, pretty wonky anatomy at times, but it works. I mean, it's for comics. I mean, it's not, and it's superhero comics. It's not even like he's doing, you know, he's not doing a movie adaptation or, you know, a documentary comic or anything, you know, and it's not based on a real story. It's superheroes. You've got, you know, overly muscled men and women with, you know, skin tight outfits running around fighting aliens. It's like if the anatomy is where it's losing you, and then I find that pretty humorous. And also, you know, God, I see those memes just like everyone else does. So this is gonna be my rant here. So here we go. If someone went through all of my work and picked out my worst figures, you know, my 5 worst figures from 20 years of doing this stuff, and put them onto one page and wanted to make a meme, they could easily do it. You could do that with any artist out there. Go and dig out their 5 worst figures and put them on a page. They would look like, you know, what the hell is this person doing this stuff for a living? And that's what everyone likes to do. But you know what? I could also go through and pick out his 5 best figures and put them on a page, and the guy would look like a genius. So, you know, all that stuff, you know, whatever. People can like and dislike who they want, but I don't really care whether a superhero comic book artist's anatomy is stylized or wonky. I care whether it's fun to read, if it excites me, if it tells a story. And Liefeld, when I read his books, I enjoy them. You know, they're over the top and silly and fun and exciting and dynamic. And yeah, you know, sometimes, you know, a back is over twisted, or, you know, feet are hidden behind the curvature of the earth, or whatever it is. Whatever, it's fun. So that's my thing. And also realize that a lot of times this stuff is being done under deadline. So the whole hiding feet thing, almost everybody does it. Frazetta did it. You know, Frazetta, king of the flower pot. People constantly in Frazetta paintings were standing in knee-high mist and standing in the swamp. And the guy didn't want to paint feet, didn't want to draw feet. They're a pain in the butt to draw and paint. So, you know, he found ways to hide them. Again, Mike Mignola, probably, if not my favorite comic artist, certainly way, way high up there, right? Another guy that I'd be putting on the comic book Mount Rushmore if I were on that committee. That's a ridiculous committee, but, you know, it's a committee now, and I'm on it, and I'd pick him to be on there. And that guy hides feet more than anyone. I'm pretty sure I read 3 years of Hellboy comics before I even realized he had cloven feet. You know, so I don't know. Yeah, you know, wonky anatomy, sure, okay. You know, but I enjoy it. It's fun, and that's what I want out of a superhero comic. I want it to be fun.
A viewer is asking if you have read Exo Man of War. It's a Dark Horse book.
I have read some. It's actually Valiant, I think. I've read some Exo Man of War. Not a lot. Mostly the Bart Sears run.
Okay.
But yeah, I've read some.
He's wondering if you can talk about the difference between Bart Sears / Andy Smith Man of War and the current Man of War. I guess if you've read it.
I haven't read. I read Bart when Bart Sears was on it. I'm pretty sure I remember reading some of Andy Smith's stuff. I haven't read any of the new series, although it's on a list of stuff I want to get to, but I haven't yet. My problem right now is that I have both the Marvel Unlimited membership and the DC Universe, and so I read tons of that stuff, and I don't have a infinite amount of spare time, so I kind of get through that stuff first before I go and pick up more stuff. I'm not one of those guys to have not that there's anything wrong with that. I hope a lot of you are out there with stacks and stacks of comics, but I'm not one of those people that has a stack of unread comics sitting around. Most of the stuff that I buy, I read almost immediately. So no, I can't really compare them that much. And it's even been years since I've read Bart Sears' run. So yeah, I'm certainly not qualified. And even if I had, I wouldn't be qualified, to be honest. But I remember enjoying what I read. It was good. But yeah, I haven't read the new run, but I have heard it's very, very good.
Another viewer asks, can we get some tips for Procreate drawing? I really like the time lapse of your painting in it and have been experimenting lately, but the transition from traditional media seems challenging. It's kind of up to you if you want to.
Yeah,
talk about that
no,
here,
I'll
but
talk about it. I just it's one of those things that I'm new to it myself. That time lapse that I put up on my Instagram, I think was like maybe the third Procreate illustration or painting that I did. Not even illustration, just painting. So yeah, I mean, I'm far from an expert on it by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's a great program, and I enjoy working in it. And I've been doing a lot of my developmental stuff in it. So I've been doing a lot of my thumbnails and color comps in it, and I think it's awesome. My iPad Pro and Procreate are probably two of the best additions to my artistic arsenal that I've had in a decade. So no, I mean, if you have specific questions you want to ask, fire away. But no, I don't know that I have any specific advice. When I use it, I basically just use it a lot like how I paint in oils. So that's my advice. If you're already good at oils or gouache, I use opacity or translucency a bit more than I do in oils. But Yeah, I don't use it that much differently than I do in oils, to be honest. So, sorry that I couldn't be of more help there, but yeah, it is, that's why it looks a lot like my oils, because I use it pretty much just like I do my oils. Only, like I said, I use glazing and translucency a lot more than I do in oils.
I feel like that's a big aspect of digital painting.
It's an easy one, that's for sure. It's a lot easier working in transparent layers or translucent layers, because you don't have to wait for it to dry in between layers. Which, going back to acrylic, that was one thing I liked about acrylic, is you could paint in layers a lot more easily. Oils, it's great to work in layering, but you have to wait, a day or two in between layers, which isn't the best thing in the world when you're under deadline. I pretty much work in 2, maybe 3 layers when I work in oils. I have my initial sort of stain / underpainting, and then the what I would call the opaque layer, and then like one finishing pass of detail and maybe a little bit of glazing. But yeah, that's about it as far as that. And then when I work in Procreate, I tend to do a bit more layering.
A viewer is wondering if you have like your top 5 favorite live field pages / covers.
I don't know that I have a top 5 pages / covers, but I have favorite books. One of my favorite books that he ever did, amazingly actually, he was probably like, I don't know, 19 or 20 years old when he did it. Maybe a little bit older than that, but he was young. It was a fill-in issue. I don't remember the number, but it was a fill-in issue of X-Men that he did. I think it might have been the only full issue of X-Men that he did. And that's a phenomenal issue. Just so damn good. So that's pretty high on my list. Some of the late New Mutants stuff that he did, like 98, 99 in there, those were really good as well. So those are some of my favorites of his. Really good. He's done some good stuff recently as well. I mean, I thought that Bad Blood was pretty strong. I'm waiting for my copy of Brigade to show up. Should be showing up any day after like however long the wait's been on that. But so yeah, that should be showing up pretty soon. So that was pretty good. But yeah, so those would be some of my favorites of his work.
Another viewer asks if you had read Rick Veitch Swamp Thing. Do you know, I don't know if I pronounced that right, but do you know of the circumstance of it ending abruptly?
I don't. I know what you're talking about, but no, I don't know what the circumstances of it ending abruptly are. I don't really have much of an in. I mean, I know a lot of guys that work in comics, but I'm far from a comic book insider. But
He follows the question by asking, more importantly, would you be interested in picking it up, continuing Swamp Thing, written and drawn by you? Potential DC editor hidden in the comments.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I would. Man, I would love to do anything. Anything Swamp Thing. I've even got some original stories that I would like to pitch one that would actually be based on this illustration, where a post-apocalyptic Swamp Thing pretty much rules the entire world from the swamp. So, but it's a nasty post-apocalyptic, overgrown, crazy world. But yeah, something maybe for Black Label or something. But no, I love Swamp Thing. Anytime someone wants to hire me to do anything Swamp Thing, I'm on board, providing, I can get it done. So yeah, pass the word to all the folks over at DC. I'm sure they'll be knocking down my door.
So kind of going back to more technique related question. The viewer asks, would you recommend memorizing John Assaro's planes of the body? I dived into anatomy, but then realized that for invention, shape design is so important.
Yeah, I would. I think that the planes of the body, the planes of the body in general are really good, but yeah, I mean that's a great tool. That Assaro planes of the figure is a great tool. I mean, it's very, very similar to the one that's in the Goldfinger book, which is also great. So yeah, yes, I would.
I guess you could also bring up like Bridgman as like supplementary to that if you're talking about figure invention.
Yeah. I mean, Bridgman's obviously his planar breakdowns of the figure are awesome as well. So yeah, I mean, all that stuff. Learn it all. Learn everything. But yeah, for figure invention, yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes the need to know, like, just anatomy, inside and out for figure invention, I mean, it's not going to hurt, but I don't know that it's really that necessary. I know some people that are great anatomists, but not that good at figure invention. I know some people that are great at figure invention that don't know anatomy all that well. From an academic standpoint. Again, Liefeld, Kirby, Larson, I mean, I'm sure they all know their anatomy well enough, but when you're doing invention, part of the charm of invention, I think, is being filtered through your knowledge base and your idea. I mean, if you want like totally academic anatomical figures, why are you inventing? I mean, there's these awesome things called models and cameras. Go and get yourself a good camera, hire a good model, and shoot some good photo reference. I don't understand the desire to, invent totally realistic figures without reference. It seems like you're making life hard on yourself. I don't know too many artists that do that. Most of the artists that I know that work more realistically shoot reference. So
I feel like for figure invention, it best serves like dynamics and storytelling.
yeah.
So if that's like part of your...
Yeah, or being able to get down on paper what you're visualizing in your mind's eye, so that when you shoot reference, you're not beholden to the reference. That's why it's photo reference, not photocopying. You're shooting the reference and then you're using it as a tool to help flesh out the visual that's in your head. So yeah, don't be afraid of shooting reference. I mean, literally most professional artists that I know use reference in one way or another. That's not saying it's a bad thing, to not use it, but even you'd be surprised at even how many comic artists shoot a ton of reference.
Or at least access it.
Shoot it. A lot of them shoot it. I mean, especially for stuff like hands and faces and things like that, it's like, man, I don't know. This whole fascination with, feeling like you need to invent everything, I think it leads to more problems than it does anything. I mean, there's a few guys, I suspect, again, Greg Capullo, he probably doesn't, if he shoots any reference, I'd be surprised. and his stuff's phenomenal. But it's he's Greg Capullo.
So back on the subject of comic books, viewer is wondering what's a good starting point for reading Swamp Thing.
Start from the beginning. Yeah, the best run was early on. I mean, as far as a long-term run, yeah, just go back and start right at the beginning. I mean, it gets really good when God, what's his name? The writer. Drawing a blank on his name right now. It wasn't Len, but when he left and the second writer, again, super famous guy, and I'm drawing a blank on his name, came on, that's when it got really good. But it's good pretty much from the first issue. So yeah, I just start at the beginning. Sign up for the DC Universe, and just start reading from the beginning. I did that recently. Got to reread through all the Swamp Thing stuff. The first thing I did when I got DC Universe actually was start reading all the old Swamp Thing stuff.
And then another viewer asks if you read any manga. He mentions Berserk, so Kentaro Miura, if you're familiar with him.
No, I haven't read the manga, no. Just for no reason other than just, didn't really get into it at any point, so. Some really good stuff that I've seen, but no, I haven't really read any of this series too much, or at all. Actually, that's not true. I read Lone Wolf and Cub, so I think that's considered manga, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Lone Wolf and Cub I read. But again, that's, it's another one of those things that people ask you if if you like such and such, and you pick out like one of the most famous things. It's like, well, yeah, everybody likes that, so. But it's not like I've read a bunch of it and I don't like it. It's just something that its popularity came when I was a little bit older and already kind of set in my ways. Manga wasn't really, there were a few things when I was young, but not a lot.
It's such an immense sphere of media that's hard to get into if you're not.
Yeah.
Haven't been on it for a while.
Well, I suspect it's the same way some people feel about X-Men, right? It's there's
American comics.
Whereas I started reading X-Men at 190, and so it hadn't been around really that long. And then I went back and picked up the back issues. It wasn't that hard to get caught up. But now, yeah, you look at some of these manga have been running for 50 years or something insane. So. It's kind of tough, and it's an ongoing story. Unlike a lot of American comics, where it kind of reboots, every couple of years.
I feel like some people don't realize that about American comics, and that stops them from getting into them.
Mm-hmm.
But with manga, it's where do you start? Oh, issue number 1. There's not even a question about it.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of the stories are self-contained, so that's why people can get into it, because they hear about stuff that's interesting, and then they can just search it on the internet. Scans are really popular for manga, and I feel like with the internet, it's really accessible for a lot of people to just get into it. So.
Yeah, it's not it's not something that I'm opposed to. I like a lot of what I see. The visuals are cool. It's just not anything I ever really started getting into. So no, not really.
So a viewer asks, if you wanted to be able to invent as quickly / accurately as someone like Kim Jong-il for existence, how would you go about gaining those skills? Kind of hard to answer if you're not Kim Jong-il. But
Yeah, I mean that's you literally go right to the best guy that's probably ever done it. I mean it's a little bit like asking me, hey, if you want to get to play basketball like LeBron James, how do you go about that? It's like, well, first you start off being incredibly gifted, and then you work your ass off. That's basically how you get to be that good. There just aren't that many people in the world that start off being with a incredible genetic aptitude, and I don't mean to downplay, what they do because they're, they're just talented. No, it's just most people who are talented get lazy because they get by on talent. There aren't that many, people like Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Kim that are just, they are some of the most, they have some of the best genetic gifts for the thing that they love to do, and they work at it like the rest of us schlubs. They have incredible work ethic and an incredible gift for it. And it's just, all those things come together, and that's what leads to greatness. An incredibly conducive environment, an immense genetic aptitude, and an incredible work ethic. That's how you get to be able to do something like that, in my opinion. Maybe I'm wrong. Again, maybe he'll email me up and say, Erik, you're completely wrong. I wasn't talented at all. It was all just hard work. And I'd go, awesome. Thank you for emailing me. I'm a huge star. Or I'm a huge star. I'm a huge fan. You're a superstar.
this is the answer I've been looking for.
Yeah, let us now be best friends for the rest of our lives. That's what I want. But that, from my point of view, that's, and my experience, especially as a teacher, that's what I've seen is that, it's this combination of a conducive environment, really, really good work ethic, and an incredible aptitude for it. It may be just to help me sleep at night, but I tell myself, that even no matter how hard I worked at it, I would never be as good as Kim at what he does. I just don't think I could. It's so far outside of the way that I understand things that I'm just not. And I've even seen his lectures and his demos, and when his lectures and demos are over, it just reaffirms that even more. I just think even more, dude, that is so. It's awesome. It's incredible, and there's no way that he could do that without a lot of hard work. But it's also just a really incredibly high level of visualization that I don't think I have. It's like, those of you out there who are athletes, VO2 max, it's basically your body's ability to efficiently process oxygen usage is essentially what it comes down to. Some people just have an incredible genetic aptitude for that. Their body does it efficiently, naturally. Now, does that mean that they're going to be great athletes? Not if they don't go and work hard at it. So then they go out, and if someone has a genetic aptitude for a high VO2 max, and then they go and develop that through hard training, well, they're going to be, an Olympic athlete or Olympic gold medalist. And they grow up in a culture where you get rewarded for being a good runner. Well, then you're going to end up being a great runner. But if you just go and work hard, yeah, you'll get better. You'll develop your VO2 max and you'll get better at running. But will you ever be as good as that guy that has the genetic aptitude? Not if he works as hard or harder than you do. You just can't. I mean, my brother and I, we're as close genetically as you're going to get without being twins, right? We're brothers. Well, he has his doctorate in physical fitness, basically. He wrote his doctoral thesis partially on VO2 max. And he tested mine, and he was like, no matter how hard I trained, I couldn't train to get that VO2 max. So, I mean, we're even that close genetically. And a guy who has his doctorate in it, says that. So it's just one of those things. Sometimes Jeff always points out, it's like sometimes you just got to take your hat off and just realize nothing you're going to do. You're never going to be as good as that person. That doesn't mean that through hard work and dedication you won't get a lot better and even get very, very good. But sometimes there's someone that's born who loves something, they get rewarded for being good at it, and their genetics are designed for it. And you end up with Michael Phelps. It's just the way life is.
But I mean, I feel like especially with art, it's always not like a technical comparison or like athletics where it's just the raw.
I think there's just as much of a genetic component to intellectual pursuits as there are to physical pursuits. It's harder to pin down. Your brain's ability to perceive a range of colors, or your brain's natural ability to store visual stimulus, or your hand-eye coordination, your natural inborn hand-eye coordination, your ability to see a range of values, your ability to think in visual terms. All of those things have a genetic component to them. It's not measurable the way that VO2 max is yet. But there is absolutely a genetic component to all. There's a genetic component to everything.
The artist's midi-chlorian count.
Yeah, basically. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? I mean, depending on who you are, you don't want to believe in one or the other, right? You want to believe that it's all talent, or you want to believe that it's not talent at all. But the truth is, like with most things, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Is it nature or nurture? I got news for you, it's both. You are born with a genetic aptitude for things, and your hard work is going to develop that natural aptitude. Like I said, athletes are just kind of fortunate that you can do a DNA test and it can tell you where your physical strengths and weaknesses lie. As artists, unfortunately, we don't have that. Although there's some things that can be tested. We've all seen those memes online where it's got, the color charts, and some people can see the letter 2 in the color field and some people can't. It's like, well, I got news for you. That's genetic aptitude. The person that can see that 2 sees a wider range of the color spectrum than someone doesn't. Well, guess what? That person is going to have a greater genetic aptitude for mixing color. They literally see more colors than you do.
A viewer is wondering if you do the like Comic-Con circuit, whether or not you're an artist alley or like boothing.
I don't do. I would like to do more, but I don't because I teach here at the school, and it would be very difficult for me to get weekends off. I would have to have someone cover for me a lot, and I feel bad about that. I don't want someone having to cover my classes while I'm off, making money. Plus, it's my job. I mean, Jeff pays me to teach, so I teach, and I like teaching. So no, I don't do a lot of convention stuff. I do, what do you call it? Monsterpalooza every year. That's my convention that I do every year. But I'm thinking about doing some more. I'm actually thinking about doing WonderCon this year. We'll see if that happens or not, but that's something I'm considering. But if you want me at a convention, there's a pretty easy way to do it. Talk to the convention organizer and get them to invite me and pay my way. And then it'll be pretty hard for me to say no. But I like conventions. I think I've missed one San Diego Comic-Con since 1992, so. I'm going to take a short break because I've been sitting in this chair for over 2 hours. So I am going to take a little break, get a drink of water, and I will be back in just a minute. You guys can keep asking questions. I can still hear the moderator, so I just need to get up and walk around. Yeah, that's fine.
Just as you said, you can keep asking questions. Someone just asked, "Damn, how long do you finish a drawing?"
How long do I finish a drawing? Like an inking like this, or just the pencils? I did the pencils for this earlier today in about, I don't know, maybe 2 hours. And then the inking, you guys have seen me working on the inking, and that's been about another 2 hours. So far I've got maybe 4.5 hours in on this, all in. Not including the little thumbnail, which was probably, I don't know, hour and a half, something like that. So we're coming up on a full, full day of work here pretty quick. Another, by the time we're done, I'll have probably almost 8 hours all in. The rough sketch, the pencils, the inking, everything. So. What, like brand? Well, the hardness for. Oh, you, dude. Hey, someone will ask it again.
Will that make me the best artist ever?
If you literally use my pencil, blessed by me, yes.
Oh yeah.
So yes, contact me and send me $50 in my PayPal, and I'll send you one of my blessed pencils.
Signed by Erik.
That's right.
A viewer asks, do you guys listen to any Alan Watts at your school?
While we draw, no.
And then another viewer asks, is this supposed to be a splash page or a cover?
In my mind, it's a cover. But I guess it could be a splash page.
And then, how has your approach changed and developed over time? It's kind of broad, but it might just be like to art, if you can answer it.
Not that much, to be honest. But that's probably also because I've been fairly insulated here at the school. My approach would probably change a lot more if I didn't teach, and if I hadn't been at the school nearly my entire time as an artist. So kind of difficult to change up your approach too much when that's part of what you do for a living is teaching approach. So. But I'm also not a particularly, I don't know what the word would be, experimental kind of person. I would definitely say I'm more of a technician. So it's not like I do a lot of, tricky things, approach or technique-wise. I think most people would have a pretty easy time figuring out how I do what I do. Jeff is definitely the more experimental of us. He tries, more stuff. He does, different surfaces and palettes and all that kind of stuff.
So a viewer asks, how much do you change your pencils during inking? Your pencils are very finished, and it doesn't leave a lot of room for discovery in ink.
Actually, you'd be surprised. I mean, these pencils aren't as tight as they look. I mean, they're reasonably tight, but yeah, I wouldn't consider these tight pencils. I've seen tighter. But there's a lot of stuff like right here where I'm putting in hatching. There's a lot of hatching that I'm putting in. What appears to be tight is actually sort of just footnotes. So I'll put like 3 hatches, and then I know that, oh, that's where the hatching is going to go. And so then I go in and hatch in that area. But I don't follow my pencils as far as the hatching goes that much. So, I mean, they're not loose pencils, but I would, I've seen tighter, that's for sure. So yeah, I have no problem changing things up as I go along, but also they're probably a little bit tighter than what I maybe normally would do if I was going to ink for myself, just purely because I'm doing it as a demo. So, I'm scared, so I don't want to, try things too much. Well, I'm sure literally ones of people are watching.
200.
Wow, that's pretty good. 200, huh?
So a viewer asks if you are an art supplies hoarder.
No, but my wife is. So I don't need to be. But no, I tend to buy what I need. In fact, I could definitely be more of a hoarder. Yeah, that would probably be good. But because my wife is, I don't really have to be. She usually has anything that I would need. In fact, this is one of her brushes because I didn't really have one for washing in big areas. No, our house isn't very big, so I don't really have a lot of room to hoard stuff and store stuff. I'd have to get rid of some of my toys.
And another viewer asks, what is the most common error you see in your students that aspire to be professionals?
Most common error. I would say the ability to think graphically is a big one. Many times I'll tell students to, draw a two value, and then they think they're drawing a two value, and it's like, 4 or 5 messy values. So I think people don't have a difficult time thinking in terms of shape for some reason. So I guess that would probably be a big one. But I don't know, students are pretty varied as far as that kind of stuff goes. So it's kind of difficult to say.
A viewer mentions in the chat, I shared this video on a how to draw comics group on Facebook, trying to get more viewers for you. Great stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Another viewer asks, what do you think of art teachers without any professional experience, like 0?
I don't want to talk trash. I'd rather avoid that. But I'd be skeptical. Let's put it that way. I do know some very good art teachers that don't have much, if any, professional experience. But I would be very skeptical. It would definitely be a check mark against. Let's put it that way. I certainly wouldn't write them off, but it would make me skeptical.
I think it also depends if, like, what your goals as a student of that teacher are. Like, if you want to become a professional, or if you don't want to become a professional and you're learning from someone who isn't, then I think it doesn't really matter as much if you don't have professional goals yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter as much, but at the same time, I wouldn't I'd feel really weird about learning anything from anyone in any other field if they hadn't done it for a living at some point in their career. Like, I'm not too sure I'd want someone teaching medical school that had never practiced medicine at all. That would make me as a student feel pretty uncomfortable. But that's just me. Like I said, I certainly have known some very good art instructors that don't, well, maybe not very good, but I've known some good art instructors that don't have a ton of professional experience. So I don't think it's mandatory. But like I said, it would definitely send up some red flags. It's like people giving parenting advice that don't have kids, And I've done that, but yeah, I wouldn't take myself too seriously if I were those people getting that advice. But yeah, I mean, if it's more of a hobbyist scenario, sure. But even as a hobbyist, I would want to learn from someone who, had been there and done it. Personally. I'd be more cautious of art teachers that don't demo. Let's put it that way. And if you don't have professional experience, you better demo. So if you don't have any professional experience and you don't demo, that's a definitely, yeah, I probably would not go to that school.
So a viewer is wondering if this is a commission, but then continues with the question by asking, can you draw any character and sell it? And then also goes on to say, do you know of any writers / artists for Marvel that started with Marvel fan art or fan fiction? So
most of the Marvel artists and writers that I know started with fan fiction. It's called a portfolio. So yeah, I mean, I'm a current Marvel artist that started with fan art. So yeah, I mean, it's called a portfolio. And as far as the legality of things, I don't know. I know what companies are, will be willing to take you to court over, and it's not doing private commissions or, things like that. In fact, they tend to be pretty lenient because especially if you're good, it's free advertising. Plus, they like to pick artists that. Let's put it this way: if I were running a company, I would be hesitant to hire someone who didn't have my company's characters in his portfolio. Again, it wouldn't be a deal breaker, but I'd wonder how much of a passion they had for what we do. But yeah, most Marvel artists I know that work for Marvel now started off doing fan art. I don't know if that's why they got hired or not, but yeah, most of them.
Todd McFarlane mentioned something similar about like building a portfolio for comics and building it with characters that people can tell, like, if that's like the version of like Wolverine, or
right?
Like, if you can create a version that gets people excited,
right?
But someone that they can relate to in
sure.
a way.
Here's a big secret. An art director wants to see the next job that they're offering work for in your portfolio so that they can rehire you to do that job again. That's what they want. They want to look at your portfolio and go, oh man, we're just getting ready to start on a new Swamp Thing project. We don't have an artist, and you have 6 awesome Swamp Thing pages in your portfolio. That's what they want. They just like if you were going to audition for a part in a movie. Well, they would want you to come in and read that part. They don't want you to come in and, ad-libbing something. Or maybe they do, I don't know. But, often they have you read from the script, for that part, or at least something similar to that script. They're not, hiring someone based off of, something totally unconnected to the movie.
It's part of working for a company.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's totally understandable. It's like, that's what I would do too. If you're going to get hired to do Magic the Gathering art, they're going to want to see, something that looks like a Magic the Gathering card, if not literally a Magic the Gathering card in your portfolio. So yeah, most of them. And no, none of the companies care about fan art. If you start selling prints online or something, well, that's different. But no, yeah, fan art, yeah, it's called a portfolio. My first portfolio that I ever took to Comic-Con had 3 Marvel cover samples in it. And that was, whatever, like I said, like 20 years ago, maybe more, long time ago. fact, I know a lot of Marvel editors these days will hire people off of social media, because they saw some Marvel pages that they did or what have you. In fact, it goes so far that when I got a portfolio review with Marvel, the person that was scheduling them told me, do not wear a DC Comics shirt to a Marvel Comics portfolio review. So they're pretty serious about that stuff. But if you're good, you're good. If you're good, they're going to hire you. My whole philosophy on that stuff is don't give them any reason to not hire you. Because every reason you give them not to hire you is that much better that you have to be. Because you have to be good enough for them to look past whatever that thing is that might turn them off.
A viewer is wondering if you have any favorite digital artists.
Favorite digital artists? Do they have to be purely digital? Because John Foster does mostly digital work these days, and I love
really?
John's stuff. Yeah.
I guess I haven't really seen what he's been doing recently.
Yeah, John does a lot of great stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of them. Again, I'm terrible with names, so Jamie Jones, pretty awesome. Tough to argue with that one. Yeah, Mullins, Stefan Martinier, which again, I'm probably butchering it, so I apologize. Those are some that come immediately to mind, but the line isn't as clear as it used to be, though. I mean, you can't say, it's like, yeah, even like 2 or 3 years ago, you would say, oh, that guy's digital, that guy's traditional. But I think a lot of the traditional artists have picked up digital a lot more, and a lot of the digital artists have started doing, trying to pick up traditional a lot more. So, Cynthia Shepherd, she's a good painter, but mostly digital for her illustrations, and her stuff crushes it. Tyler Jacobson, again, both of them good oil painters though, so really, really good. So yeah, I don't think that line isn't as clear as it would have once been. A lot of tradigital going on these days.
On the topic of portfolio reviews, digital versus traditional, a viewer asks if you did you have a print portfolio or a digital portfolio when you got yours reviewed? I guess that's in any point in time.
Do you know how old I am? My first portfolio was all traditional. Digital wasn't really, was just becoming a thing. But there weren't things like tablets or smartphones or anything yet. So yeah, if you're talking about the portfolio that I actually took around to show people, yeah, it was actual printout portfolio. Because yeah, there wasn't really digital that you carried around with you like that back then. So yeah, I'm old. But no, I've never really had a digital portfolio as far as artwork. I haven't. I mean, I can do digital, but I don't really want to get hired to do digital, so I don't put digital in my portfolio. And again, there's nothing inherently wrong with digital. That's not. I worked in video games for whatever, like 5 years, and it was fun. But man, I got tired of sitting in front of a computer all day. That's for sure.
So you kind of mentioned this earlier, but a similar question. The viewer asks how you deal with all the marks not fragmenting the larger read of the image. So like with ink, you know, everything is very well, it's either black or white. So
Right. For me, I approach it basically, again, my thinking is pretty much just like drawing tonally, only I'm replacing halftone and soft edges with feathering. So I do it the same way. I still, if it's in shadow, it's black. If it's in light, it's going to be the white of the paper or some feathering. If it's linear hatching, well, then that's representing a halftone or a soft edge. So that's how I do it. So yeah, really not, again, not, I don't really approach it really any too much differently. In my mind, I don't think of it too much differently than tonal drawing. It's just how I'm representing shape, value, and edge. Shape I'm going to represent with a dark shape. Value I'm going to indicate with feathering or hatching. I don't really use gradients too much. There's not going to be, any washes or gradients. In fact, I'm not using it at all on this one. So yeah, that's how. Just if it's shadow, it's a black shape.
of course, like linking shapes together when you can.
Yeah. I mean, again, that goes back to, there's a reason why it's called a shadow pattern. So when I'm creating a drawing, I'm creating a shadow pattern. That's linking things together. So same thing here when I'm creating the dark, the shadow. Well, then that's going to be linked together as much as possible.
And some of those soft edges, even though they're not black, they still read as part of the bigger shadow shape.
Right, and then that becomes a soft edge rather than a halftone. Whereas a halftone would be sort of, to me, the difference between a halftone and a soft edge is kind of semantic, but if you've got an actual floating tone out here, well, that's a halftone. If it's an extension, if it's feathering out of the shadow pattern, well, that's a soft edge. So again, that might be, getting into semantics, but sometimes, the spoken language is kind of built on semantics.
A viewer does wonder, though, if you have experience using washes in other illustrations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For ink.
Yeah. I've used washes in inking before, and again, nothing, technically against it. There's a lot of people out there that use washes that do it to great effect. I just am a bigger fan of more like comic style inking. I guess you'd call it. Although there's a lot of comic artists out there now that use gray washes with like Copics or Copics or however you pronounce it, which I use from time to time. I mean, all of it is just personal preference. It's not really, I'm not so arrogant as to think it's like, oh, the way that I do things, that's, I am the shit. That's the only way to do it. It's like, no, it's an aesthetic that I personally enjoy more, and that's how you achieve that aesthetic.
So going back to actually one of the earlier questions, a viewer follows up by asking, or by saying, I guess I was asking if a digital portfolio, do they count these days, or perhaps that counts more than print portfolio these days?
I don't think it matters. But again, an art director would probably have more to say about that than I would. But no, I don't think. I think if your work is good, that's what matters. That's the end all be all, really. Is your work good? Can you do the work that they need you to do, or not? In fact, half the time they don't even ask. My art directors is like, in fact, most of the time when I tell them, yeah, the painting's done, I just need to go photograph it, and they're like, photograph it, and they didn't even know that I worked traditionally, and nor did they care. If you're bringing the goods, they really, in my experience, don't care. It's the quality of the work. Everything else, yeah, I mean, maybe on a given job, I have turned down some jobs where they needed a digital file because of what they were doing. But that was just because of the semantics of the job. Like they needed a layered file for some reason. And I was like, well, I mean, yeah, I could do that, but then I'd have to do multiple paintings. And even then, they didn't really care whether it was digital or not. They wanted a layered file. And I was like, well, you might want to get a digital artist because you're asking for something that would be, easy to do digitally, but is very time consuming and almost defeats the purpose of doing a painting. So no, I don't think it really matters. In most instances, I don't think it really matters.
The viewer's wondering what you think of, if you read Grant Morrison, and what are like which work did you find the most mind-blowing / influential in his words?
I've read Grant Morrison, but I couldn't really pick out a favorite right off the top of my head. He's a good writer, but he's not one of my top writers that I follow. But he's good. I mean, I know I've enjoyed some of his work. I just, right off the top of my head, I'm not sure I could summon forth what they are. Honestly, I follow artists a lot more than I follow writers, with a few exceptions. Because the visuals to me are visuals are not necessarily more important in comics, but to me they're more important. It's what I buy comics for. So I can read a comic that is maybe not necessarily written wonderfully, but looks beautiful. I can't read a book that's well written but looks horrible. And again, that's more of a statement on me than on anything else. But the art is more important to me, just personally. So. But I do know that I've read some of his work and enjoyed it. I just can't think of what it would be, right at this very moment. I have read some really badly written comics before because they looked beautiful. And no, I'm not going to say which ones they are. I've probably gotten in enough trouble today.
So a viewer's wondering if you've sent your work, like sent your publisher your work, and they're wondering if it's best to do that physically with a physical portfolio or a photo scan is good enough.
I would never send original artwork to a client. But if you're asking whether to do an actual mailer or email, if they have resources, do both. You know, if they have an art drop, email it to the art drop. If they have a mailing address, mail it to the mailing address. As artists, we kind of have this idea that we're in this, that everyone remembers us, and it's like, oh, if I do this, it's like, oh, then I've got this one chance. No, they're not going to remember you. I mean, if it's good, they'll hire you, and if it's not, they won't. If it's a maybe, then you'll get put in the maybe pile. But for the most part, they're not going to, you know, when you submit a year later, unless you're in the maybe file, they're not going to, you know, or if they get it, yeah, or if they get it in the mail and in the art drop, you know, if you're good enough, then they'll get whichever one they see first, they'll hire you. And then if they see it again in the other one, they'll go, oh, huh, that's kind of funny. But no, I wouldn't. Don't overthink stuff like that. You'll drive yourself nuts.
A viewer asks if there are any specific exercises in hand steadiness when inking, aside from general practice.
Anything that improves dexterity, I imagine, would help with that. So yeah, any dexterity exercises. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that, you know, would do that. But
do you do any abstract line exercises, like just pulling lines?
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, you can see, you know, even just to warm up today, I was doing just some abstract line exercises, just to get my hand working for the demo today. Yeah, always getting warmed up with your tools is always a good idea. But, you know, I'm not really one of those people to do like tons and tons of like dexterity charts or anything. I'd rather, you know, do a master study. And during the course of a master study, you're essentially going to be doing the same thing. So, but that's not to say that, you know, obviously I do some warm-up exercises. But no, mostly you'll get better at inking by inking. I find that's true of most things. If you want to get good at drawing, draw. If you want to get good at painting, paint.
A viewer's wondering if you've seen J.H. William III's run on Alan Moore's Promethea.
I am aware of it, but no, I have not seen it. And that's what I was trying to think of earlier, Alan Moore on Swamp Thing. Alan Moore and that's probably my favorite run is Alan Moore and Wrightson, which was a long run and it was awesome. But no, I haven't. I am aware of it, but I have not read it.
They mentioned that it had some nice ink washes in it.
Yeah, I imagine. I have seen it, and it's very nice. Definitely another one of those ones that's, you know, on my list of stuff to check out at some point. There's a lot of books out there that I have a lot of interest in that I just haven't picked up yet. And then sometimes it ends up in that, that get to someday pile that it's kind of like being in the friend zone. It's just, it's there and you just never really get around to it. There's a lot of movies like that for me too, a lot of movies that you would think I have seen, or I think I would have seen, and just haven't gotten around to it for no other reason other than just I literally haven't gotten around to it.
Movies that people would say that you'd really like, and it's like, yeah, I probably would.
Yeah, totally,
Just haven't
yeah.
seen it.
Yeah, they're absolutely right. I probably would like it. Plus in comics right now, man, it's crazy. There's so much good stuff being done that it's impossible on a budget to keep up with all of it. So much good stuff. Like some of the stuff that Mark Millar's been doing is, he's a writer that I follow pretty well, and I don't like everything he does, but man, the stuff they've been doing, since, I mean, with Millar World in general,
You're
but
pretty busy.
yeah, especially the stuff that they've been doing since Netflix bought them. There's some really, I mean, I think Sharky, which is almost up now, is almost done. I think they have one issue left. I think it comes out like next week too. Is a really fun series. I'm not an elitist at all when it comes to comics. I like stuff to be fun. I mean, that's my number one thing, is I want stuff to be fun. That's not to say that everything I read has to be fun, but I like Sharky. I like, what's the other one that he's doing now? Is what he's doing with Mateo. What's it called? Space something. That's a really good, or at least so far. I mean, there's only been.
It's the one with like a trucker.
No, that's Sharky. The one I'm thinking of is two women on a revenge mission.
I don't remember what you're talking about, but
It's great, a lot of fun. Yeah, there's just so many good things out there right now.
Space Bandits.
Yeah, Space Bandits, that's it. That's the one. That's a lot of fun. Like again, when I was young, when I was a kid, it's like, man, independent books, it definitely wasn't like it is now. I mean, Image kind of came along and changed everything. But yeah, when I was a kid, it's like independent books were weird. Independent books, most of them, with a very few exceptions, weren't stuff that someone, not something that a 12 or 13-year-old should probably be reading.
It's like the underground comics.
Yeah.
Where it's like they didn't have any other way to get down their ideas other than like comics, where you could just, you're doing everything. You're writing, you're drawing.
Exactly.
And so I'm going to make the really weird thing that I wanted to see.
Right. And then Image came along and comic world was different. And then when they kind of changed their business model, it really changed. I mean, all of a sudden they were out there putting out, now for a while they already do kind of compete with DC to a certain degree, but for a while they were really right there. And it's a cool business model. It puts a lot of stuff out there that, otherwise you probably would miss or overlook or never get to see. 7 to Eternity, that's an awesome book. So good. I wish they could get on a little more regular schedule, but I guess that kind of quality takes time. I don't think Opania could be putting out a page a day at that quality. I don't think that would be possible. But yeah, man, good stuff out there right now. I wish I could spend, $200 a month on comics, but I just can't afford that. All right, looks like we're just about up here. So. No, I'm just messing around with Lucas, jumping around all over the place.
Struggle.
Yeah, so if you've got any last questions, better fire them away because I'm going to be wrapping it up here in about 2 or 3 minutes.
So a viewer asks, do publishers tell you panel by panel what to draw, or is there a written script? So I guess for sequential work.
I haven't done a lot of professional sequential work. In fact, I haven't done any professional sequential work. I've just done samples. Just no projects have come along that I could do and paid me enough for me to pay my bills. But the sample scripts that I have gotten have mostly had a panel by panel breakdown, but I know it also varies to a certain degree. Depending on what writer you're working with. Sometimes they'll just give you a page by page breakdown. Some will give you a panel by panel breakdown. Some will go so far as to give you a full script. So I think it just kind of depends on the writer and the company. I mean, the traditional Marvel method was either just a panel by panel breakdown or a page by page breakdown. And then the artist would basically go and tell the story, and then the writer would come back in and script it out. But I think it kind of depends. I think that's actually more the way DC works now, even though it's called the Marvel method. But I think a lot of it now depends on the writer.
And another viewer asks, if you knew what fundamentals you could have had drilled into yourself when you got into drawing, what would those be? Anatomy, perspective stuff of that nature?
Just
I guess,
good.
like most important fundamentals that you'd want.
Yeah, just good solid drawing more than anything. But that's tough to get through. It's something that's easy to realize once you know it. But while you're learning it, it's difficult to know what that even means. But yeah, just good solid drawing. But certainly I wish I would have gotten into perspective a little earlier. I'm pretty good at it now, but it was really probably one of the last technical things that I learned, and that was probably a mistake. I wish I would have learned that a lot earlier.
And then, what was the video game that you played the most, like, as a kid? So before you were 13.
Before I was 13, the one I played the most, I don't know if it was before I was 13, but it was right around there. There was a Wolverine game that came out on Nintendo that I played quite a bit. In the arcades, I played Street Fighter 2 a lot.
Which character did you play?
Mostly, God, what's his name? The bestial guy. What's his name?
Blanca.
Blanca mostly, but a little bit of Guile as well.
And then they follow up by asking, and how long was it before you realized you logged twice that many hours drawing into your teenage years as you did play video games as a child? So I guess he's like relating like how much you played video games as a kid versus like how much you studied art as a teenager.
Oh, I always drew more than, I mean, that would have been, I don't think playing video games never outpaced drawing to me. I always drew a ton as a kid, and I didn't play video games a ton. I mean, I played video games, but I was never really a huge video game kid. I was always more outdoorsy. So I played sports a lot and, hiked around, and I was more, imagination kid. But that was because video games back then weren't what they are now. I probably would have been into them a lot more if they were, as visually appealing as they are now. But when I was a kid, yeah, I mean, the pictures in my imagination were way better than what was in a video game. So yeah, I always drew more. Yeah, I don't think there was ever a time that I played video games more than I drew.
And then also kind of related to that, preference between digital and traditional art. Do you have a preference between the two, like digital versus traditional?
Well, yeah, I think that would be obvious. Traditional. I mean,
right.
Yeah, that's. But again, that's a personal thing. It's not that I think one is better than the other. I like having a painting right in front of me. I like having, a real physical product that I'm working on. I like the tactile aspect of it. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and call that done for today. I'll work on it more kind of off and on over the next, probably 6 months and eventually finish it off.
Looks great.
Thanks.